you pray with me? Holy God, Emmanuel, we are here waiting for you. So may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to your sight. O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I have this vivid memory of spending an afternoon in the mall with my grandpa. He, as always, was on a mission to go somewhere when I decided I would much rather stop and look at the stuffed toys in Build-A-Bear's workshop. So, I stopped. And he did not. Before I realized it, I looked up, and my grandpa was missing. Now, I did what I was taught to do, and I continued to wait there, enjoying the view of toys while I was at it. My grandpa comes back livid. You can't just stop whenever you'd like, Brittany. You have to tell me when you do. And that's where my memory stops. When I called him last week to get his side of my getting lost episode, he couldn't even remember it. Why, you ask? Because it had happened so many times before. He said to me, Brittany, I don't remember you getting lost in the mall, but I do remember always losing you in winters. You see, my grandmother loved to shop. So he was often tasked with watching me as she circled around her favorite department store, combing through rack after rack of clothes, hoping to find the next best deal. One time, he recounts, while commissioned to keeping an eye on me, I disappear. He admits that he probably wasn't doing quite the best job paying attention, but either way, he and my grandma panic. They frantically search the store, looking high and low, calling out my name, but no avail. He can't recall how long they looked for me, but eventually, they noticed clothes on one of those circular racks moving. When he pulled the clothes apart, there I was, innocent as ever, circling around the clothing rack, pretending it was a merry-go-round. Now, once my grandpa found out that what I was preaching on this week, he was very quick to point out that I am no Messiah and should not allow these stories to get into my head. And that, in fact, these things are a bit of a character flaw of mine. But I digress. I thought about these stories a lot when I was reading the gospel text this week, and about the juxtaposition between a child's innocent desire to stay behind and their parents' frantic concern. In Luke chapter 2, we catch the only glimpse of Jesus' childhood found in the canonical Gospels. Now, as an aside, there are some bizarre stories of Jesus' childhood found elsewhere outside of our Bible, such as in the infancy Gospel of Thomas, which tells stories of a trickster Jesus who turns clay pigeons into real ones, who curses children, who makes him mad and causes people to go blind. Ultimately, it was deemed inauthentic for being written far a bit too late, and as such, probably heretical. But again, I digress. As far as what we have in the New Testament, Luke chapter 2 is it. Jesus is now 12 years old. I know, they grow up so fast. And he and his parents go to the temple for Passover. Luke tells us that they have been doing this for the past 12 years, and this year is no different. In fact, Jesus has been carried to the temple in Jerusalem since before he could walk. In the story immediately preceding ours for today, Mary and Joseph took baby Jesus to Jerusalem for the purification rites in their tradition. And it was there that they encountered two prophets, Simeon and Anna, who both recognized Jesus as the redemption for all God's people, and where both Mary and Joseph walked away amazed at what was being said about their child. But that was 12 years ago. 12 potentially ordinary years had passed since then. 12 years without angels or shepherds or prophecies or unexpected proclamations in the temple. For 12 years, they had ventured to Passover with their child, as was their custom, with little to no concern. So one can only imagine that Mary and Joseph expected this year to be more of the same too. And as the festival comes to a close, Mary and Joseph head back towards home in Nazareth with the safety of only a caravan of travelers can provide. Though they haven't actually seen Jesus, Mary and Joseph assume that he's somewhere in the crowd, reasoning that they have been doing this for 12 years, after all. So they carry on, vowing to look for him among their friends and families as they continue their journey back to their hometown. But a day passes, and they begin to worry. They still haven't seen their child. They search high and low for Jesus, but to no avail. I can imagine they begin to frantically ask their friends and family if they have seen their son. But each time, they are met with a bone-chilling no. Eventually, they come to the sobering reality. We've left Jesus. Mary and Joseph decide they must leave the safety of their caravan and make their way back towards Jerusalem alone. For 3 days, 3 very long days, they are missing their Jesus. Surely Luke is foreshadowing another time that Jesus goes missing for 3 days. When he has died and is buried and is raised on that 3rd day. When he is once again found in an unlikely of places where people wouldn't have expected. But that's Easter. And we're not quite there yet. So finally, Mary and Joseph make their way to Jerusalem and they find their child. Relief sweeps over them. And when his parents see what they're doing, they are shocked. There he is, sitting in the temple with the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone around them is amazed by his understanding and answers. And like Simeon and Anna 12 years before, they see something in Jesus that Mary and Joseph might have otherwise missed. At some point, though, Mary's relief turns to frustration, maybe even anger, as she is the first to speak in our story and says, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you with great anxiety." Have you ever felt that way before? Angry and frustrated because you can't find God? Usually, when I read this story, I find myself gawking at the seemingly carelessness of Mary and Joseph. After all, how on earth can you lose the Son of God? But this time around, I found myself seeing much more from their perspective. For if I'm honest, I too lose Jesus more often than I care to admit. In the hustle and the heartache, when the peace on earth and good tidings to all begin to fade into just another ordinary day, I too, with great anxiety, call out to Christ, "Why have you treated us like this? Me like this?" So when Jesus responds to them by asking, "Why are you searching for me? Didn't you know I was in my Father's house?" I, like Mary and Joseph, am left stumped by his response. What on earth is the Christ child up to? Surely Jesus' sassy quip about doing his Father's will is more than a classic adolescent "he's not my real father" thing. But that's just it, isn't it? Jesus has been defying our expectations from the very beginning. From the moment an angel appeared to Mary and told her she was favored above all people, that she, not some royal queen, would bear the Son of God, Jesus has been challenging our expectations of what the Christ child would look like. From being placed in swaddling cloth in a manger, to his ministry, healing on the Sabbath, dining with tax collectors, talking with Samaritans, Jesus reminds us that quite often our expectations and God's look quite different from one another. And ultimately, Jesus defies our expectations when on 3 days after he is killed, he can't be contained in a tomb. You see, the gospel narrative is full of stories showing up when we least expect him and staying behind when we're ready to move on. As nice as it be, we simply cannot place a tracking device on the child of God, nor can we tether him to our expectations. So should we really be surprised when we, like Joseph and Mary, are ready to move on from the temple celebrations, but Jesus decides to stay a while? We don't know why 12-year-old Jesus decides to stay in the temple when the rest of his group heads back home. Maybe he's trying to make a point in his first steps towards adulthood, proving to his parents that he isn't a kid anymore. Or maybe he gets distracted and loses track of time deep in conversation about the things he cares about and the God he loves. Maybe Jesus doesn't think he's lost at all. But whatever the reason, Jesus' decision to stay while the remainder of the group carries on butts right up against our reality that we may never understand what God is up to or where Jesus might dwell next. But that shouldn't stop us from searching. No matter how many times we leave Jesus behind or lose track of the movement of God, the search must continue. For in the searching and the finding, we are shaped by the stories of God. As Mary and Joseph can attest, the way of Jesus is full of questions and heartache and misunderstanding. But it is also one of peace, hope, joy, love, and light. There will be times when we are frantically searching because we realize our fast-paced lives have left Jesus behind again. But there will also be moments where we crash face first into the face of God, when we remember that all is calm and all is bright. So perhaps as we look at the coming year, as we continue to search and find the Christ child in the most surprising of places, may we too, like Mary, ponder the things we have seen and treasure them in our hearts. For it is then that we encounter our Jesus, who shatters our expectations, who gives light and life to our world. Amen.